Welcome to History and Film, and we have another bonus episode this week recommended by a listener. Nick suggested we check out Four Lions after we did an episode on Paradise Now, and he thought it was kind of the black comedy version of what they did in Paradise Now.
And it only took us 7 months to get to it.
Well, yeah, and we'll see when I actually release this. Oh, hey, that for us, that's pretty good for us, actually.
That's true.
That's pretty quick.
That's true. For us, that is pretty fast. So, when this movie was recommended to us, I had never heard of it before. Had you ever heard of Four Lions?
It sounded vaguely familiar, like, because I always put like a top 10 together every year, and I feel like it was one of those that maybe a few critics were putting like in the bottom of their top 10. I never got around to maybe. So like, I think it was probably on my radar in 2010, but I'm not 100% sure. So it didn't sound like completely out of nowhere, but no, I wasn't.
It definitely wasn't on my radar in 2010.
Okay.
Nor any time since then until we got this email. And because, I guess, did he say in the email that it was a comedy?
Yeah, here, actually, I got it right here. So, let's see. Have you seen Four Lions? It also manages to humanize suicide bombers without condoning them, which is kind of what we talked about in Paradise Now. Yeah, right. He says it's a comedy focusing on an incompetent terrorist cell of British Muslims, but it has more emotional depth than you expect, and it's quite touching at points. Which, yeah, spot on there, Nick.
That is a very good description. I must have just forgotten that it was supposed to be a comedy.
Oh, no!
I started it.
You didn't know it was a comedy?
Well, when I started the movie, I just thought it was like, it's, similar to Paradise Now, but with British, like, in a different setting. And so I started, and they're all acting like complete morons, and I'm like, what is this? And then I was like, oh, this is supposed to be a comedy.
You didn't realize it was The Office, but for terrorists.
Which I was not expecting it, because like the very first shot of the movie is like they're making the tape, and he's holding the toy gun that's like 6 inches long. And they're like, oh, just hold it closer to the camera. And I'm like, okay, that's like, this is a comedy. I didn't expect this, though.
But it's not too dissimilar from that same scene in Paradise Now. I mean, so
that's true.
You could definitely see
true.
it brings in the comic element, where he's basically reminding his mom to get like a certain brand of like oven cleaner or whatever it is.
Right.
And so, yes. Now this, of course, we say it's a comedy. It kind of had a unique tone to any movie I've seen. Like this really kind of was unique. I don't think I've seen a movie quite like this. As far as I've seen black comedies before, but man, this was, because none of the laughs were like on Front Street. You know what I'm saying? They don't, and of course that's also like the British stuff, but also just being a dark comedy. Like it was funny. I was laughing out loud at times.
Yeah,
but it's uncomfortable in a way too. Of course,
it has a very unique kind of like comedic point of view, where normally with movies like this, either you get the, something similar to like Team America World Police, where it's like, oh, the military industrial complex and the government is kind of silly and inept, or it's like, oh, the terrorists are the ones that are silly and inept. But in this movie, it's like both of them.
Oh, right, because we see the cops going after the wrong person. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like at the last 20 minutes of this movie is just a comedy of errors, literally, on both sides.
Yeah.
The cops and the terrorists.
Oh, right, yeah, the Wookiee and all
like,
that. Yeah.
There's some stuff that's like, I don't know, I maybe have a darker sense of humor than most people. I was laughing at a lot of stuff, but I also, while watching, would be like, man, some people watching this might be like really uncomfortable with the stuff that's like being made fun of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it actually ties in, like I said, it's a very British thing. So, again, I think the Office comparison is accurate. This is basically The Office if instead of set at a paper sales company, it was a terrorist cell. And, like, it's really just The Office for terrorists.
Even the style of filmmaking.
Oh, right.
A lot of, like, handheld, kind of shaky cam.
It almost feels like a mockumentary, except there's not quite that actual, fourth wall there.
Right.
But no, it's like in the British version of The Office, for those who haven't seen it, it's actually more like the Brits seem to thrive on that awkward stuff, where like in America, we get a little more, on average, a little more cringy and uncomfortable watching that stuff. And the Brits just seem to think that's hilarious. So if you actually go watch even the American version of The Office, the first 3 to 6 episodes, they're way different in tone than where the show went. And like Michael Scott is way less likable.
Oh, he's a scumbag.
Yes.
In the first season, he's like a complete, he sucks.
Right. And they kind of morph him into doofus so he'd be more acceptable in the United States. Whereas in the British version, Ricky Gervais just plays that same character equivalently, that same way the whole series, but that's getting kind of more British sense of humor. So kind of the point there too, where this is kind of awkward and uncomfortable. In general, I think the Brits are more comfortable with that. And so you're right. It's definitely awkward and uncomfortable, but also kind of funny, but you feel bad for laughing because you know it parallels so many real life things. But then at the end of the day, I think the whole point of the movie is to show that religiously fundamental terrorists of whatever background are a joke and they're losers. And that's the point. Ultimately, it's just making these people idiots because they are.
Right. But it also doesn't, at the same time though, while the majority of the movie is, these guys are morons and it's stupid and like being a terrorist is stupid because it is, but also like the way that the cops go about trying to combat the terrorism is also really stupid.
Right. Which is also reflective of, unfortunately, things in real life where we don't necessarily anticipate things that may with hindsight, but are, maybe could have been handled better or,
And as a matter of fact, there are 2 instances in the movie where cops have the terrorists in their actual gun sights and shoot the wrong person. It happens twice.
Right, and shoot an innocent bystander instead, and then try to say that, like, oh yeah, no, we got the right one. That was the right one. Right. That was definitely a terrorist.
Yeah. And they said, we shot the right guy, but the wrong guy blew up or something like that. It was like this, this completely, like, intellectually, twisted, weird excuse that they have at the end for shooting the wrong guy.
Yeah, it's like, no, we totally took out the terrorist, but then the other guy somehow set off the bomb accidentally on my mistake. Like, nope.
And this, I guess, since this is history and film, we should maybe address the fact that this is not an actual historical event that they're referencing.
Right. Although it does have lots of parallels and things we can talk about for sure.
Right. So this movie came out in 2010. So it's only 5 years after the 7/7 bombings.
Yes. Yep.
Where that was actually 4 terrorists involved in that incident, and 3 out of the 4 of them were British, but of Pakistani descent, just like we see the characters in this movie are. And for those who don't know about the 7/7 bombings, the double-decker buses is like 2 double-decker buses that got blown up in London on July 7th, 2005.
Well, and underground, or some subways too.
The subway.
But it's like a simultaneous thing where there's like 3 explosions all around the city at the same time, and then one a little bit later with four suicide bombers. That if you look at they basically they ranged in ages from 18 to 30. And you start looking at it, you had a young wife and kid, or was living with so and so. It feels to me very much like this film was based off of these guys. Not directly, not one for one or anything like that, but just as far as the ages and the backgrounds, it's kind of taking these same guys.
There's actually, since 2001, there have actually been a pretty big number of, jihadist terrorist cells either carrying out attacks or being foiled in the course of carrying out an attack or being found out before they had a chance to. But like this kind of stuff in Europe happens pretty frequently.
Oh yeah, there's a whole list
especially of them, at this, like at 2010, that's like, between 2000 and 2010 is like heyday for European jihadist activity.
Yeah. And then not long after that bombing, that 7/7 bombing in 2005, then half a year later in February of 2006, there was actually a big, I don't know if you say Islamist or Islamist demonstration, basically a kind of not just your regular run-of-the-mill Muslim, a little more of the ones who side with the extremists, if not extremists themselves, demonstrating in response to... So this is when you had all the cartoon stuff going on. So there was a big protest in front of the Danish embassy in London because a Danish magazine or newspaper had published some offensive cartoons about Muhammad. But the protesters weren't just saying, hey, this is, disrespectful to our faith. They're basically saying, kill the people who dare insult the Prophet Muhammad. And there's definitely a fine line between, hey, we find that offensive, and death to the infidels.
Sure.
And Europe does deal with a lot of this. And honestly, I don't want to say more so than the United States, except that I don't feel like you don't see these kinds of demonstrations in the U.S. of the pro-violence Muslims in the U.S. That doesn't seem to be a thing here.
And, like, definitely more so in the United States, as far as, like, actual, like, okay, so 9/11 obviously happened in the United States, but as far as, like, number of jihadist cells that are being busted, like, Europe definitely has more.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens in Europe all the time. It happens in the United States hardly at all.
Right. The U.S. even has the stories. Maybe we talked about this before on the Paradise Now episode. I actually kind of forget. But the U.S. even has stories of the FBI will get a Muslim to go infiltrate a mosque to root out potential terrorists. And the people who go to that mosque end up reporting the FBI agent to the FBI. Because he's asking all these weird questions and we think he might be a terrorist.
Or there's a lot of, there's also a fine line between some of the investigative, I'm putting that in air quotes, techniques and just like straight up entrapment.
Oh, yes. If the undercover person is the one planning the attack and then bringing people and convincing people, it's like, well, you're the one that started it then.
And it can be something as, you know, we got this person, we talked him up, and then we got him to buy a plane ticket to Syria because they wanted to like join ISIS or whatever. It's like, oh, that's material support for a terrorist organization. It's a federal crime. You're under arrest.
Wow.
You know, but yeah, and this, I guess I found a quote from a 2017 study that was looking into jihadist radicalization in the UK specifically.
Okay.
And so the drawing of Muhammad is a pretty specific example, but just in general, it says specific causes cited were biased towards Israel vis-a-vis Palestinians, non-action on Kashmir and Chechnya, and active oppression in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the wider war on terror. Other alleged causes included social and economic deprivation, Islamophobia, particularly following 9/11, and intergenerational clashes between first, second, and third generation Muslims. And, like, a lot of that stuff is not necessarily specifically cited, but, like, that general feeling is mentioned a bunch of times in the movie by the guys in the terrorist cell.
Yes. And that's where, I don't know, it's kind of tough because we only have kind of our perspective and, you know, we get frustrated with any kind of xenophobia in the United States, but it's easy to forget that other countries have often larger issues with Islamophobia. And even the whole Brexit thing was largely a xenophobic kind of response to the Brits not wanting as many immigrants and foreigners coming over and working in the United Kingdom. And that was kind of even the impetus behind the Brexit push. And of course, it ended up being a lot of people regretting their vote right after, and they're kind of stuck with it now. But yeah, Islamophobia in the UK is just a general issue with, you know, there's arson on mosques and discrimination against Muslims. And obviously you should go without saying that, you know, the fundamentalist, you know, pro-suicide bombing group is, I mean, it's like less than 1%. Like it's just not representative of who most Muslims are going about their day-to-day lives, but then they're the victims because they're associated with these terrorist groups. And of course, you can see that too, that even non-Muslims, Sikhs, get a lot of crap, get a lot of anti-Muslim hate, even though they're not Muslim. And it's just like,
right.
If you're going to be an idiot, at least be a smart idiot.
Yeah, if you're going to be racist, at least be like
correctly
racist.
That's we shouldn't say that. There's no correctly racist. But at least understand your racism. I don't even know what we're trying to say.
At least correctly categorize it. Well, no, this is
okay. We're digging.
Yep.
Don't be racist.
Don't be racist at all.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
How about that?
Okay.
So I feel like this movie is like one of those kind of like looking back on it creepy foreshadowy things because they're
the London Marathon.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a movie made in 2010 about a terrorist, Islamic terrorists attacking a marathon.
Yeah.
And then the Boston bombing happens in 2013.
Yep.
Where the same thing happens, but in Boston. And then even like all the scenes of Riz Ahmed with like his wife and young child, and like the older brother out of the two Boston bombers had like a wife and a young child. And that was like a big part. Like there's a lot of parallels that seem really kind of eerie looking, watching this movie with both of those in hindsight.
Yeah, for sure. And then the explosives that they're building in the movie seem to be accurate. Almost surprising, because sometimes you'll see them just kind of make, like in Fight Club, they they spout out a way to make a homemade bomb, but it's wrong. They intentionally give just a made up method of making a bomb so that people couldn't replicate it. And not that they detail how they're making their explosives here in this film, but it is accurate with those homemade like hair dyes and bleach products and stuff that I guess you can, it's even something they call TATP, and it is kind of this go-to, and they're trying to make sure people don't have access to large amounts of this stuff, because so the explosives they're making in this film are the same kind of explosives used in the 2005 London bombings and several other attacks in subsequent years. The shoe bomber guy was trying to hit the bomb he was trying to was all the same kind of explosive, homemade explosive, and it is also, it says, prone to accidental detonations, which they used to humor.
Very volatile.
Yeah,
like don't make it. Don't make it. don't make it. And honestly, maybe don't even look up how to make it, because you probably could if you wanted to, but don't do that.
Right.
Just don't look at, just don't worry about it.
Yeah. And which they used the humorous effect in the film when they have all these accidental explosions. Like
the one guy gets blown up because he's choking on the SIM card, and the guy tries to give him the Heimlich and accidentally blows him up.
Just sets it off. Yeah. I wasn't ready for the casual death in a comedy like this, and even when their first buddy explodes tripping by the sheep, and then they had just the bag of his body and his guts and sheep guts just all in a trash bag. And then later, the police find his head somewhere when it falls out of a tree somehow. And it's just what is happening? This is so bizarre and uncomfortable. And I'm sure the Brits just find it hilarious.
Oh, and something else that was I was kind of surprised that this was even something that the movie seemed to be commenting on. But out of the 5 terrorists, there are 2 of them that are pretty specifically written as mentally ill. Which is actually a thing. So
they will target those people and convince them that
So I read a study from the Netherlands Institute of International Relations. In 2006, they did a study on jihadi terrorists in Europe, and from all of the groups and incidents that they looked into, 5% of those jihadists suffered from some form of mental illness.
Okay. Well, of course, how's that percent compared to the general population?
I'm not sure.
Okay, because 5% doesn't sound incredibly high, but yes, as far as if you're needing someone to go blow up a chemist shop or pharmacy, that you could just prey on someone who basically doesn't know any better or is easily influenced, and you just kind of convince them that.
Well, and you see it happen in the the guy says he's like, well, what does your heart say? He's like, well, my heart says that this is wrong and we shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, what's your head say? And he says, oh, well, my head says that I've already come this far, so it'd kind of be messed up if I just quit.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, that's actually Satan made your heart and your head flipped, and so actually that's your heart, and you should listen to your heart. It's
Yeah. And he's just an idiot, and there's,
And that's kind of funny. That's a silly joke in the movie, and I laughed when they were, when that was, but that's also kind of exactly how they get people to do that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, it was really good, but it was kind of not like anything I'd seen before. My other note was the pre 9/11, and again, obviously 9/11 was in the United States, but it did have worldwide impacts. Even people across the world are kind of know where they were on 9/11 kind of thing, because it was even though Britain has attacks, on the London bombings, obviously it was tragic. And 55 people were killed, but compared to 3,000 on 9/11. But in 2000, the UK did pass a terrorism act that basically just gave the police extended authority if they suspected terrorist intentions. Basically, the cops in Great Britain could arrest you without charge for 48 and hold you for up to 48 hours if they suspected that you were related to terrorism activities. And then also with searches and seizures and stuff, they just had a lot more latitude if they could tie it into terrorism in some way, which of course then just like we would see over here led to the controversy. And yes, it's one of those things, you can use this law then for things that are outside of it, and you just have to say that's what you thought to hold someone that you in. So,
right.
So it's definitely controversial. And then obviously when you get to profiling and prejudice against Muslims, and so it's definitely problematic, but also it's tough. It's tough to figure out how to fight these things because terrorism in general. You're trying to fight an idea. Well, hey, you were a Marine during the War on Terror.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that I have anything to add, but I figured maybe I should shut up and let the Marine talk.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it is kind of controversial, and depending on who you talk to, people draw the lines in different places. And like we were talking about the Boston bombers in 2013. Well, there was a lot of once an organization or an investigation gets classified under terrorism, well, now it's not just a crime. Now it has to do with homeland security, national security. And so you get a lot more latitude when you're the government as far as who is allowed to question these people, whether or not they're allowed to have a lawyer, whether or not they're, you need to, necessarily observe all of their constitutional rights while you're holding them and questioning them because it's national security. And I think in that specific case, I don't think it's a stretch to say that a lot of that's justified because, fuck that guy. But you can see how it becomes dangerous when you start saying things like whatever group of protesters, well, they're terrorists now. You know what I mean? Right.
Or someone that you think, or it's the brother-in-law, someone who's into some terrorist stuff. So you're going to bring him in and hold him in indefinitely without charges, even though he's completely innocent, and you're violating his civil liberties just because of association or potential association.
That exact thing happens in the movie.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The cops basically arrest his brother-in-law.
Thing. The dude's right. The brother-in-law, who's like
also kind of a conservative jerk, but
but he's
not a terrorist. He's a pacifist.
He's very specifically nonviolent. He is very much like, he has some views and opinions that suck. Like, oh, I don't speak with women. Women should be, have this separate little room in the house, or I shouldn't be in the same room as a woman, and I don't talk to women, and they're beneath me or whatever. But he's also like, under no circumstances whatsoever is violence okay.
Right.
But he's the one him and his friends are the ones who get picked up by the police instead of the actual terrorists that are planning on blowing things up. And then what do we see happen to him? He gets taken to this like warehouse in a shipping container that they say is technically the sovereign property of Egypt, and that allows them to have Egyptians there who will torture him. And so that's how they get around his, constitutional rights and his, frankly, his human rights. And it's because he's in this shipping container that's technically part of Egypt. Now they can torture him, and he had nothing to do with the plot at all. He was the brother-in-law, or I don't even remember if he's the brother-in-law. He was just a friend, maybe.
I think it was his brother.
Oh well, they called everyone. They said any male Muslim was a brother.
Oh, I guess I thought it was Riz's actual brother. Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe it wasn't literal.
Either way, it doesn't matter. Like, he had nothing to do with it. But because he was like tangentially related to one of the people in the plot, they tortured him. Yeah,
wow.
Did you catch when you watched the movie? Did you watch into the credits at all? Like those little clips they were showing during the credits?
Some, but remind me.
Okay, did you catch the one where they were showing the footage from the drone? Watching them shoot the bazooka in the wrong direction when they were in Pakistan.
That they killed Osama bin Laden?
That they blew up Osama bin Laden. And again, this movie came out in 2010, and Osama bin Laden was killed in a raid by Navy SEALs the next year.
Yeah.
In 2011. But I just thought that was interesting that at this time, like, that's a plausible, quotes, air quotes, plausible thing that could have happened.
Oh, because they're even in Pakistan, aren't they?
Yeah. They go to Pakistan and they accidentally blow up Osama bin Laden. I just thought that was kind of funny. And then I also wrote down on here Benedict Cumberbatch ? In all caps.
Yes. He shows up as another incompetent person. This time as the negotiator who just starts asking him about girls and if he's a boob or butt man.
Yeah. Asking the guy if he likes big girls. And then that was kind of funny too, because he's like, what are your demands? And he goes, haven't got any.
Yeah.
which is like, it's funny, but like also kind of sad and depressing. But when I saw him, I was like, is that Benedict Cumberbatch?
Oh,
and then I was thinking, I was like, okay, this movie's from 2010. And I was like, I don't even know what I would have seen Benedict Cumberbatch in.
Nothing
prior to
this then, right.
And nothing. Like, he's in the movie for, he has, 3 minutes of screen time, maybe?
Right. And this is kind of before he broke out, in the States at least. I don't know what he was doing in...
So, I went and looked at his filmography.
Okay.
He was in the first season of Sherlock, the BBC Sherlock, with him and Martin Freeman. The first season of that came out in 2010. But I didn't start watching that show until 2012 or 2013.
Right.
As I think when I first saw that show. But I mean, I think the first thing that I saw him in was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which came out in 2012.
Okay. See, yeah, basically he kind of went from Who to Huge really, really quickly. So
yeah,
you're right. So like you have the Sherlock show starting right around then, and then he's kind of doing I never saw Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but then you're getting into Star Trek. He's in 12 Years a Slave. He's the voice of Smaug in The Hobbit, and it's kind of like basically between 2010 and 2013 is when he just blew up, and then Imitation Game is 2014. Yeah, and then he's Doctor Strange by 2016. So yeah, he just kind of between 2010 and 2013, he blew up pretty quickly there.
Well, and now he's an A-lister. There are movies where they sell the movie because they put his face on the on the cover. Like it's but it's just funny to see a movie that from not that long ago, 2010, and it's like Benedict Cumberbatch in this little like bit role. He has 3 minutes of screen time, and he's like this incompetent doofus.
Yes, was not expecting him to show up like that. And obviously he'd been working for years before that, but just kind of in like British TV and stuff. Yeah,
right. Well, and I think. I mean, his not breakout role, but the first thing that made him like people know who Benedict Cumberbatch is was Sherlock, right? I mean, that's just timeline wise.
Yes, and of course I can't. I don't even see Sherlock on here, so I can't find the. Oh, there it is. 2010. Yeah. So, but again, that was big. You're right. So that was kind of the first thing. So yeah, the simple version is I would say Sherlock into Star Trek. And while also doing, obviously, small roles and other things. But, yeah.
What year did Star Trek come out? The one that he was in, where he's Khan?
That was 2013.
Okay. What year was the first Hobbit movie? Was that 2012? 2013?
2012.
2012? Okay. All right. Yeah, I think Sherlock must have been the first thing that I ever saw him in. Or no. Never mind. I just said it was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Now that I'm remembering, I definitely saw that before I saw Sherlock.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know who he was. I didn't prior to seeing that movie. Like when I saw Sherlock, I was like, oh, that's that guy from that spy movie that I saw.
Okay, and I probably did see him first in Sherlock, and was just like, hey, this guy's pretty good at playing Sherlock Holmes. And of course, the lead of the film is Riz Ahmed, who we really loved in Sound of Metal. Last year, we've been talking about Riz a little bit, but we haven't really hung a lantern on it. Yeah, it is Riz Ahmed.
Riz Ahmed is great.
Yeah, he is awesome. And again, someone I was not familiar with, even though I had seen him in he's in Indian Rogue One, Star Wars.
Yeah, he's in Rogue One. He's in if anyone has seen the HBO miniseries The Night Of.
Oh, and I have not seen that.
Where he plays a young guy who is accused of murder, and he's like on trial for murder, and it's like kind of the story of him getting accused of this murder and then how his time in jail while he's on trial kind of changes him.
Oh, huh.
It's actually pretty good.
I think I saw the trailer probably back when it came out. Yeah, Riz Ahmed is I wasn't aware of him until Sound of Metal, but obviously I'd seen him and other things. It just kind of, he was more of kind of a bit player I didn't recognize. And then now it's like, oh, okay, no, this guy's legit.
Oh, he was in Nightcrawler. I think was probably the first thing that I saw him in.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, again, I had seen that. And he was just a really good guy who was like Jake's partner or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's one of those things where you see the movie and then realize after the fact, like when Sound of Metal comes out, oh, he was that guy. Oh, he was that guy.
Yeah.
And so since we ended our world history initial timeline with Midnight in Paris, which was a 2011 movie, this basically goes right before that. I'm just going to say it was contemporary to 2010, which again makes sense that it would be at that point in the British timeline. It doesn't never actually says the exact year, but you could argue it's, maybe a little closer to the London bombings, or these guys were the London bombers. Yes, right around 2010 is where I'm putting it in the timeline, even though it isn't historical. it definitely points to a lot of issues in the United Kingdom and the world at large when looking at Islamic fundamentalism and the rise of terrorist cells, and even kind of specifically homegrown terrorist cells, like self-radicalized people. So like these aren't people who are recruited specifically by an Al-Qaeda type group or an ISIS type group. Yeah. These are people who just kind of, I think they would call it self-radicalization, where they're just kind of, and even the guys in 05 were actually all, like you said, they're British born.
Yeah, and most of the jihadist groups in the studies that I looked at were like, they didn't have a name. If they did have a name, it was just like network associated with whoever the network leader guy was. These were not guys with strong ties to Al-Qaeda or ISIS. I mean, some of them were, and they definitely all sympathize with those groups, but like no actual connections. Like a lot of them are just people with grievances who are radicalized somehow. And then, you know, obviously social affiliation. So whether you're friends or family with someone who's radical, then has a lot to do with whether or not you become radicalized. But yeah, that was one thing that I thought was interesting, is that these are not necessarily like actual card-carrying members of Al-Qaeda or ISIS who are coming to do these attacks. A lot of them are just radicalized online or just kind of by themselves and then go carry out these attacks.
Which is why if a politician is saying, like, we're going to eliminate terrorism, it's like, well, then you're an idiot, because you can't eliminate terrorism any more than you can eliminate depression or hunger or anything like that.
Well, and also foreign policy and attitudes toward that foreign policy are definitely a big factor in a lot of these people's radicalization.
Yes.
But so is social issues, cultural problems, economic problems, like locally.
Right.
Have a lot to do with these kind of like just general discontent with the status quo. And so if you're in an economic rut and also, you know, you're seeing this foreign policy that you don't like, and also you're having to deal with Islamophobic assholes on a regular basis, that's what radicalizes people. It's not like you are just minding your own business and then one day, you know, Al-Qaeda bad guy number 4 calls you on your burner phone and all of a sudden you're a terrorist. Like, that's not how it works.
Right. And fighting it. Yes, you have to fight the threat of any imminent attacks and watch for people who are plotting. But at the same time, where the world sucks is, you know, undermine the conditions that give rise to terrorist sympathies in the first place. Right. And again, not that that's ever going to be perfect either, but you can ameliorate it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and let's not let people get it twisted, like, fuck all these people that do these attacks. You know, they deserve every bad thing that happens to them. They are responsible for their actions.
Right.
Just because you have a grievance doesn't mean you get to kill people about it. But at the same time, it's not just these are bad guys and so they're going to do bad guy stuff. Like, sometimes there are things that could have been changed to where maybe people don't go down this path in the first place.
Well, it's the same with any crime. We talk about how do you lower crime rates.
100%.
It's like you have to fight crime, but you can also ameliorate the conditions that lead people to fall into crime, just in general. And then, yes, terrorism is just a horrible crime. So,
yes.
Yeah. All right, did we solve all the world's problems? I think we just kind of got the Formula War piece going here. So you're welcome, everybody.
All right, yeah. Oh, man. I didn't have it as a specific note, but the scene where you have the 2 snipers and they tell him to shoot the bear, the guy shoots the Wookiee, and then it's like this whole argument over...
True, yeah.
What? No, I shot that. That's a bear. He says, no, I think that's a Wookiee. He says, what's a
Wookiee?
He said, a Wookiee is a bear. He said, no, we have to shoot the honey monster. He said, a honey monster is a bear. And then at the end of that argument, he's like, well, it must have been the right guy because I shot him.
Yes. And that was actually, I mean, that's almost chilling when you think about it.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, thanks Nick for recommending that movie. It was we did enjoy it quite a bit, and hopefully we'll be able to do more bonus episodes for you. And actually, I don't know when we're going to release this, so we're probably still in the middle of our tournament to determine the most interesting person in history, and this is kind of a little diversion for that. So keep an eye out to see who wins that tournament, and we'll catch you later.